Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We're Talking Movies. As always, I'm Andrew Duvall, joined by my friend Cade Bonzel, and today we have quite the movie to discuss because every now and again, when you're a movie reviewer, you come across a film that makes you look in the mirror and contemplate, do you really enjoy doing this? And also, every now and again, you come across a movie that makes you wonder, what kind of beast is man? But ever so rarely, do you find a movie that makes you do both? And today we have one of those movies because today we are reviewing, and I can't believe we're actually doing this. We are reviewing Cats from 2019, one of the most horrendously reviewed movies of the last 2 decades, and what is often considered one of the worst movies ever made. And after you hear what we have to say about it, you're going to find out that we wholeheartedly agree with that comparison. This is a movie that it was not released. No, this movie was not released. This movie escaped. There was a breach in containment in the quarantine facility that this atrocity was kept in. They couldn't get the blast doors closed, and as a result, this thing chewed its way to the surface and began killing prospectors and ranch hands and villagers, and then spread like a virus across all of humanity and released when it came out in December of 2019. And today we're going to talk about it, not because we wanted to, but because we jokingly said that we were going to review this at one point, and we're holding ourselves accountable for that, which means we're going to be a hell of a lot more careful when we decide when we want to review things. So let's get into it before I decide I want to kill myself. Cade, do you have anything remotely good to say about this movie before this turns into a rant fest about how god awful this piece of garbage is?
I will say this. I think that this movie does have a lot of great people in it. It has Judi Dench, Ian McKellen, Idris Elba, Jennifer Hudson, Rebel Wilson, James Corden, Taylor Swift. I will acknowledge that the movie does have a lot of great talent to it, so I'll give it credit for that. It was able to get a lot of great people.
Yes, and also the fact that this movie was directed by Tom Hooper, who won Best Director for The King's Speech, which is a movie I love. That's literally the only good thing I can say about this, is that yes, there was talent involved. Okay, with the pros out of the way, let's get into the cons, shall we? Because holy crap, there's a lot of them.
You want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Let me begin by saying I am not familiar with the age play that this is based on. I've never seen it. I'm not a big theater fan to begin with. But the plot of this movie, there is literally no plot. Now I know we've said that before and sit here, but this movie, there is literally no plot to follow. There is the entire movie is a character with a stupid name shows up, sings their stupid names in introduction, and then sings about their one defining character trait in a song that goes on for way too long. And then another character with a stupid name introduces themselves, sings about their one character trait in a song that goes too long, and then goes away and then barely shows up in the movie again. And then the one tiny little bit of conflict in this movie happens and is dealt with within 5 minutes. The opening song of this movie lasts longer than the actual conflict of this movie. There is literally no plot to this thing.
Yeah, so I think just to add on to that, when it comes to just the formula of this film, just the plot at least, for me, the formula is just too repetitive. I think, yeah, like you said, the plot is we meet each cat, we hear a new song, and then we move on to the next one. And each cat that we meet just kind of plays a very, they just don't really play much of a role throughout the rest of the story. It's just a series of songs that string together a sort of plot, if you want to put it that way. And maybe again, I'm not too familiar with the Broadway play, but maybe it did work well for that show. It's just about, and that might have also worked for a lot of other performances. But the thing is, it's about whether or not that translates well to the screen. And that type of formula, again, while it might work on Broadway, it just doesn't really work well with this type of medium, in film.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen other very famous Broadway plays be transferred well to the big screen. Chicago comes to mind, and The Color Purple comes to mind. But God, this one just didn't. This shouldn't have made the jump to film. And another big problem with that, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about how god awful this CGI is. Okay, everybody in this movie looks uncanny valley, creepy, horrifying, strange, off-putting, off kilter. Nothing looks right, and as a result of everything looking just a hair too off, everybody looks like a horror movie villain that's about to jump out of the screen and eat you. And also the fact that apparently there was a cut in this movie where you can actually see the cat's buttholes, because somebody thought that was a great idea to include in this. The fact that they had to cut that out, it's just horrendous. It is really horrendous.
Yeah, I think that parts of it, when it comes to the CGI, I think parts of it, one of the reasons why it feels so, unsettling, I honestly think a lot of it looks like it's unfinished, in my opinion. And that might be what the issue is for a lot of people. And actually, one reference that I heard from another YouTuber, his name's Mark, he's Fanboy Flicks. Shout out to you, Mark. Love your channel. I think that he had said it looks like a Snapchat filter on steroids mixed with a car crash or something like that. And I thought, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it. And again, the fact that it looks unfit, it does. It looks unfinished, and it also looks because you can tell who is playing what character, but they look just off enough to be really, really scary looking. If this was meant to be a horror movie, they did a great job. But if it was meant to be just a musical, oh my god, they screwed this up so bad.
But I think back to what we were talking about with the story, and this relates to what we were just saying about music. So I think that when it comes to musicals, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not like the biggest fan of musicals. If it's a good one, then I'll definitely enjoy it. It's just the types of musicals I enjoy are I like the ones that have good stories, but they have songs in them. Like they don't just happen over and over again just right after the last one finishes. They give you time for the story to progress. But with this, it just doesn't work with me specifically because it's just a whole bunch of songs stringed together to create a sort of plot. And to me, the story just doesn't progress that well.
It's literally the same thing happens again and again and again and again, and then one 5 minute piece of conflict, and then that's resolved, and then it ends.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably where my issue is with the plot. But aside from the plot and the CGI, another issue that I actually have with this movie would have to be all the characters. I know this might be debatable, but for me, no one really has much of a character. We just meet a cat, move on from them, and they sing a song, meet a cat, they sing a song, and we move on to the next one. There just isn't enough time, just for me specifically, to really get invested with these characters because we don't spend enough time with each of them. We follow Victoria, but we don't really learn enough about her for me to really root for her or any of the other characters.
I mean, do we learn anything about Victoria? I mean, she kind of just stares open mouth like like a bass fish the entire movie. And again, everybody else has one character trait. They sing a boring song about one character trait. And some of the people in this movie cannot sing. I'm sorry. And then they leave. Okay, nice to see you. Another thing I need to complain about the music. Some people in this movie can't sing. James Corden can't sing. Rebel Wilson really can't sing in this movie. And all of the music is slow and boring and takes way too long. The opening song of this movie is 7.5 minutes for an opening song whose purpose is to just introduce the main character, who again has no character trait. How are you supposed to get invested in a movie when there's literally nothing to get invested in?
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is for me, Victoria didn't feel like much of a protagonist to me, that she felt more like a vessel for the audiences to inhabit so that they could experience everything. And that's kind of where it really lost me in that way.
I think I put it best when you and I were discussing this movie before we decided to review it. I've never been simultaneously bored, confused, annoyed, and horrified watching a movie before. I should not be bored with a movie less than 10 minutes into it, like I was watching this piece of shit. Oh, here's another thing we haven't talked about yet. Let's talk about the weirdly sexual tone to this movie, too. There is a lot of leg spreading, there's a lot of rubbing, there's a lot of very suggestive shoulder movements. I'm convinced this movie wasn't actually meant to be released. I'm convinced this was just an overly expensive fetish project by somebody at Warner Brothers. And then it accidentally got released.
Well, I understand where you're coming from with that, but another issue that I have with this movie is how many times the characters use the word jellicle, to be honest. That word is used so excessively throughout this movie. And apparently it means dear little cat, according to old Deuteronomy and what she says to Victoria. I mean, shouldn't we have gotten that explanation much earlier on in the film at some point? Because they're just using Jellicle repeatedly for so many different things. And there just comes a point where it just gets so overused and annoying. And you just think, okay, what is this word? What is the significance of this? And then you find out at the end. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I think it gets really annoying really fast. And again, the fact that they don't explain that till the very end makes it even worse. For me, it reminds me of all the freaking ice puns in Batman and Robin. Like, it's
Yes.
not quirky, it's not witty, it's just annoying. This whole movie is annoying and gross and weird and off putting and boring. This movie deserved every critical lambasting it got. It deserved to bomb at the box office like it did. This movie made $6.5 million on its opening weekend. 6.5 million against a budget of 95 million before marketing. That says a lot. This is one of the most disliked movie trailers when the initial trailer came out on YouTube for a reason. This movie deserves its 6 Razzies it won, including Worst Screen Combo, Worst Supporting Actress, Worst Supporting Actor, Worst Screenplay, Worst Director, and Worst Picture. The world was never the same after this movie came out either. I'm not saying this movie solely created the hellscape that was the 2020s, or that is 2020s, but I'm sure it doesn't help matters either. This is the worst movie I have ever seen. And I know that there is probably far cheaper made pieces of shit out there. Like, I haven't seen Turkish Star Wars, and that's also regarded as one of the worst movies ever made. I've never seen Inchon, and I'm sure again there's more cheaply made piles of shit out there, but nothing has made me this angry, this bored, or this horrified. This is the worst movie I've ever seen, and I am so happy I didn't see this in theaters just to see how bad it was. I am so happy I waited till this came to streaming because this movie is horrible. This movie is absolutely atrocious. And yeah, it is the worst movie I've ever seen. Is it the worst movie you've ever seen, Kate?
Honestly, no. I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. It might be one of them, but I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. But apart from that, what would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay. I've seen bad movies before. We've reviewed a couple of bad movies before. And I never thought I would give this particular rating because, oh, nothing out there can ever be this bad. There has to be at least some enjoyable aspect of every movie ever made, even if it is ironically enjoyable. But this movie doesn't even have that. So I am going to give this movie a 0
Wow, your
out
first
of
zero.
10. It is that god awful. So what do you want to give this pile of shit for a score out of 10?
Yeah, I think for me, on a scale of 1 to 10, I might give it again. I think I think this movie has a great cast to it. I think that the production design was decent, but other than that, I think I'd only give it a 1.5 or a 2 out of 10. Because although I enjoyed those little pieces of the movie, it's really just not. It just doesn't land for me. So yeah, I'm gonna have to give it that low of a rating. All right, guys, I think that's going to be the end of this review. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you later. Thanks. Bye.